So we're here to discuss traceability. Are you guys excited? All right. This is the best part of cannabis. All right. So we have here John Yang, CEO, co-founder of Trees. At the age of 12, this now San Francisco-based software entrepreneur began his career within his father's computer shop, selling, building, and fixing problems using technology. He has built and implemented enterprise platforms for Apple and Toyota, to name a few. He is utilizing his skills within the cannabis space to build compliant, data-driven software solutions and founded retail POS Trees in 2016.
A PR firm deserves a raise.
So this entrepreneur came from the extreme sports industry and was one of the first licensees in Washington adult use cannabis market. After recognizing that the provided state system lacked business solutions, he developed a seed-to-sale software that spread mainly through word of mouth and now provides software to half of the Washington state market. Rufus Casey, CEO, founder of GrowFlow. Prior to working in cannabis tech, this individual was CEO of Commerce Inc., a venture-backed software company serving retail and restaurant small business owners. He now works to process $2.5 billion in cannabis sales annually on popularly used POS system, Greenbits. This individual has 20 years of experience as a systems administrator, software engineer, and solutions architect. The company that he works with has cannabis clientele in 23 states and 5 countries. I call VP of Technology at MJ Freeway. All right. So I wanted to kind of field the crowd, and you can shout out some questions or anything you're trying to get out of this now. Chaos, please, go. Any questions?
What's traceability?
Good job, Jenny. All right, so that being said, we'll just jump right in. So I wanted to go into very basically what is traceability, because in California, we seem to be beginning there. So if you guys want to just conversationally attempt to explain what traceability is and what is required from the state in this process. Anybody want to take a stab at it?
Yeah, I mean, traceability it's enforcement, right? It's the result of a series of very stringent regulations from the states to really help track every product, to curb the diversions to the black markets, and allow the state to collect the taxation that they've imposed upon, a heavy taxation, but is there a way of collecting it and allowing cannabis to be legalized in the various states?
Yeah, that's about it.
So in California, a little bit of a difference is sort of terminology, too. We're noticing people calling it track and trace, obviously. And right now, we're all preparing, hopefully, for metric integration. So I don't know if you guys want to talk as third-party integrators to the process of preparing for metric integration or want to speak to that at all.
Sure, yeah. So basically, coming from the black market to this regulated thing is an absolute nightmare. I don't know how many people here have licenses. Anyone here have actually licenses? Yeah, it's just a giant time suck. You're going to spend a lot of money on payroll. You're going to doing stuff that doesn't benefit you at all. Yeah, it's not fun. Yeah, it's really not fun. Yeah, basically, what we do up here is we try and make that easier for you. Most of the systems here will stop you from having to basically do everything twice. So you could use a free system like Metric. You're going to enter all your data, but then you'd still have to enter your data for your inventory control. Something like MJ Freeway or GrowFlow will help you with your invoicing. Metric doesn't care about that. They just want their tax money. they just want their tax money. They just want to be able to recall their
If we can
product.
explain the two differences between the state system and what a third-party integrator does, I guess backing it up for people that don't know what Metric is probably a good starting point. So Metric has the state license. Do you want to take it, Ike?
Sure.
Okay.
So Metric's going to be your state system. They care about certain pieces of data, right? So this is the part Rufus was talking about what they care about. They care about black market activity, dispersion, and the tax data. There's a lot of data points that need to be collected in order to deal, much louder. There's a lot of data points needed to deal with black market activity, dispersion, the tax. It's not just as simple as collecting 3 pieces of data. There's hundreds of points of data all along the life cycle of the plants, the manufacturing, the retail operations, the entire way. So when you're preparing for Metric, some of the key points is to be very knowledgeable about the regulations, because while we try to make it easier for you, it's still ultimately your guys' responsibility to know them and deal with them. We try to make it, but the benefit of a system, an integrator who then takes your business data, right? So if we talk about that data I just talked about, the dispersion, the tax, and it's this big, the state doesn't care if you guys are making money. They don't care about margin. They don't care about your yields. They don't care about, let's say a strain has 10% better sales, but it costs you 30% more to produce it. That's part of your margin pieces. This is all business data. So this is a small piece of data that they care about. You care about a much bigger piece of data. And so these systems, the integrators, they help be a business system that has all of that same information in it. And then they take that small piece of data, the smaller piece, I shouldn't say it's small because it's noticeable, and they send it to the state system so that you have one pane of glass to operate in, while sending the data needed for the state system to them so they can also do their regulation. As John talked about, the enforcement, the fun process of compliance, as Rufus was letting you guys know about, all these pieces help get smoother by using those systems, but ultimately you get this one pane of glass for your business operations. And that's really one of the better benefits. So that's the integrator side, that's what we provide, that software, and then it pushes that data to the state system, which is what the state system provides. In California's case, it's going to be California.
Right. So
or Metric.
In each state, there's going to be a state software system. So in Washington, we have Leaf. In California, you'll be on Metric. And as you go towards getting your license, then you'll be going through Metric training, and you have an option to be on a third-party system, which is what everybody on this panel has. So that being said, does anybody have any ideas to when Metric is coming online? Because before we thought it was July, and now we're hearing January.
I don't think the state knows when it's going online.
Right.
So, the only traceability system that's live in California is one called Cal Origins, and the entity behind that is SIGPA, right? So Metric isn't online. We don't know when it's going to be online. It should have been online in January. It could be online this coming January. We don't know, but as system integrators, we're all prepping not only our infrastructure, our product, but also prepping the training and the education for operators to be compliant and to go online. It's not easy. It's not an easy feat, and a lot of our operators today, clients, prospects, and share across all of our companies today are procrastinating. They're taking their time because they're uneducated, they're scared, they've been bought into scare tactics, but they don't know what it takes to be compliant. So rarely do they even know what it takes to fully operate their business, let alone what Metric means and what traceability means. That's coming.
So all your systems communicate to the state system through API, which I've learned about now that I've gone away from the cannabis and over to the software side here. What are you and your folks doing to prepare folks for traceability? And I guess also, how do your systems work as a standalone versus what they'll look like when they're on Metric, is I'm curious about.
I'll take a crack at that. Like, what's fascinating about California is you've got the biggest cannabis market in the world, you've got the leader out there, but California is about to go through something that they've never experienced before. Other states have gone through this transition, but not nearly at the scale or the level that California does. The timing issue is one that exists in every state. It's what makes it complicated. It's a bit uncertain. We also see with our clientele and our customer base, people don't quite know what to expect, and there's no way to really internalize what dealing with Metric means until you're kind of in the throes of it. So for example, we've taken some of our clients through a Metric readiness assessment, 25 questions and a quick survey around, hey, do you understand certain concepts and ideas that are going to be relevant when Metric arrives, and have had great feedback. We're going to offer that to prospects, greenbiz.com, NWS. Like, you can kind of take a 25 question and 30-minute assessment and get a feel for what's there. But it's going to be a fascinating transformation. It's going to be a bumpy one. And it's education is really kind of the name of the game right now, getting clarity as to what this really means and what it entails. And as a license holder, kind of bracing for that, budgeting for it, because it's a tough transition, and we've seen it hundreds of times over.
Exactly. And that's why I'm so excited to have all these essentially competitors on the same panel, because as a service to California, you can educate them with your knowledge. So
I wanted to add to that. I think the question is, how does your product today, as a standalone product, pre-metric, might be different post-metric? And for us, we've taken a different approach. It's not going to be drastically different, right? Because traceability, that's a baseline for any of our services and any of our products. What we want to enable is the business workflows to thrive, right? What would it take to reduce steps, to reduce labor? And metric in itself is very limiting. So with that limitation, we as the 4 companies here, our job is to make sure as problem solvers to take those limitations, but still build very robust business workflows on top of it. And that's why people would have to use a product like Trees, a product like NJ Freeway or Greenbits or GrowFlow, instead of using metric as a standalone product. There's just no way you could do that, especially in California.
Very, very true. You asked the question about APIs.
Yeah.
There's kind of like 3 ways to get data into metric. You can kind of manually enter it by visiting metric.com. That's a hugely manual, hugely time-intensive process. You can leverage a CSV or a file, export and then upload that into metric. But you have reconciliation errors. You have all sorts of things that go sideways during that upload process. And then you have kind of an API integration, which basically is a system like any of ours up here speaking directly to metric and automating all of the activity that you have to do upon each sale as a retail license holder or on the grow side. And kind of streamlining that process. So you might hear different providers talk about integration with metric. A lot of times that means they've got a CSV file export import, not particularly sophisticated. With the API, you can basically take the manual piece out of the process and let the software do that work for you against those designed workflows.
Yeah, I don't know about other integrators, but ours is a fully automatic API. So there's no manual uploading of CSVs. Like you said, that can come in with its own errors. GrowFlow pre-metric and post-metric is very, very similar. We flip a switch. There's really only a couple of pieces that are with a large difference. The biggest one is the actual tags themselves. You guys probably know that you're going to have to order tags and put them onto all of your plants. Now, GrowFlow will generate an ID for a plant. You can stick a barcode on it pre-metric if you really want to. I don't think many people will do that. But when metric comes along, you're going to have that tag. So there's a slight difference when you take some clones, turn them into growing plants. You're going to have to align which tag you're going to start on this first plant in the room. So there's a couple of differences like that. But our goal is almost unnoticeable differences.
Could take a question.
Hi, my name is Becca Dubois. My company is CanAccount Pro, and I provide accounting and tax for the cannabis industry in the U.S. and accounting for Canada, Cannabis. And I so need to know how we get this information into an accounting software. And there's as many software packages as there is. I mean, API goes into 0. I'm sure that's going to be easy. But then there's a product called Transaction Pro Importer who will work to get it into QuickBooks. But it seems to me that we need to basically wait until we have the barcodes from the state in order to get our tags to put on our plants to load the data into our inventory, or like, for example, QuickBooks inventory or whatever. Can you help me out with that?
Sure.
Maybe this would be a good one to go down the row or something like that, because it may be different for everyone. But
I was going to talk a little bit about what the RFID actually means, because it's interesting to talk about barcodes. And so you can start out with a barcode. All RFID tags is a radio version of a barcode. So a radio signal, in the passive mode, you collect the signal. In the active mode, they actually broadcast. And they're these tags, and they're just doing a radio signal with a unique number in them. That's all they really are. They're a fancy barcode, is what they end up being. They cost more than a barcode. That'll be one of your guys' concerns, but that's what they are. There's a lot of different technologies out there. The Bluetooth sensors can do this, the RFID sensors, barcodes, but that's what they are. They're fancy barcode. So when we talk about RFID, we don't want to make it more complex than it is. Now, I think your other question, and we can go down the panel of how everybody does it, was how do we get the data, the taxing data, I think is what you're asking about.
Well, and sales data.
Sales and taxing data. Out of metric, what you're going to find is metric takes a much smaller piece because the government cares about their taxes, not necessarily how you're collecting it. So again, the integrators provide business management software. So MJ Freeway provides systems across 23 places, and we have exports to Quicken. So you can pull that data out of there. That same data can be pushed up to the state system for the sales reporting that's required. So you use that system to push it. You also use that same system to pull it out. As integrators, we want to be that middle solution for the business management,
Right.
not
Yeah.
just the state system.
So for metric, it's going to be more of the state required data where they're trying to figure out where the taxes come from. Third-party integrators are going to have more of those other solutions. And then if you kind of want to touch on how you provide servicing for accounting or speaking to that process.
Yeah, like, so that point, with or without metric, you're trying to serve your clients to kind of get the front
Right.
office information into the back office, so that the point of sale system.
Tax compliant.
Yeah, exactly. So the arrival of compliance or metric does not matter. In fact, that's one of the things that makes metric tricky. Is as a retailer, you look at a product based on kind of the SKU in which you and your consumer think about that product. The way that the state of California and the way that metric looks at it, it's kind of, you know, it's the weight of the plant that came from. They don't think about it through the SKU. So from a license holder and a compliance perspective, it gets really complicated really quickly, which is why you want to leverage tools and you want to go through the investment in education up front. As a bookkeeper or an accountant serving a client, with or without metric, it's not going to make a difference. You can leverage these systems to kind of get the sales data out, upload it into QuickBooks, and then be on your way.
Is there anything else you guys want to talk about as far as from an accountant's perspective, that side of the thing?
Yeah, I would like to add something.
Okay.
We're very thankful for accountants in this space. I've seen you at a lot of panels. You've asked the same question because you care a lot about that question. And the answer, as you know, as an accountant, it's not a cookie cutter answer. It's not because I'm integrated with QuickBooks, I'm integrated with Quicken, I'm integrated with this and that you flip a button and you're going to get the data? No. You're going to have account mappings. You're going to have how do people book certain entries. Only you as an accountant or a series of accountants understand how that works. Right? So at Trees, we want to facilitate the data movements, but we want to work with you and especially value-add partners such as accountants. And as a platform, enable the various different ways and scenarios to get that entries booked the right way so that in the case of an audit, when it comes, you understand how it was done and you have consultants and accountants backing it up. So that's what we're aiming for as a platform provider.
Something that I've heard a lot about in this state also is for portals like third-party integrators, most of them will have unique user logins that they can give to their legal team or their accountants or things like that. But with those sign-ins, maybe you manage their ability to move inventory or something like that, but you can just kind of look at the numbers or do exports or something.
And I'd like to add that, I mean, really there's only a handful of companies that have any experience. 4 of them are at the table now. There's a handful more. If most of your clients in cannabis are gonna have to use a handful of companies, and I'm sure that all of them are going to have exports, whether they sync via API or CSV or however it does. I think you're going to be really working with a limited number, and I don't think it's going to be too bad.
You can shop around for those types of features, but some people integrate with QuickBooks, some you'll do an export. So there's a couple different ways.
Part of my question was, for the grower, okay, they're growing a certain seed, and that seed is producing a plant, and that plant is producing X, Y, Z. I mean, there's that part of the accounting process as well.
Right, you're talking about the cost accounting as it?
No, I'm talking about just getting the compliance part of it.
Right, so that's the traceability, what we talked at the beginning, is literally you're tracking from the minute the seed goes in there all the way till it's sold, right? And that process, we made it sound a little simple at the beginning, but there's an immense amount of data. It's what stage are the plants in? What is their weight? When you pull them out of the ground, how much do they lose in water weight? All of these pieces, all of this data is tracked throughout the entire traceability. Some of it relates to taxing, as far as if you have 100 plants and you harvest cull 10 of them, leaving 90 left, that is a piece of cost that you want to do for cost-based accounting. You're going to say that I spent fertilizer money, I spent pesticide money on this plant, and it only made it halfway, and then for yield reasons, I decided to cull 10% of them, the ones that weren't healthy. That is a part of your cost as you can figure out the rest of your business. All of this is kind of part of that traceability, and you can just keep adding on data points depending on, each of us have specialized features, quite a bit of overlap up here at the table, but that's what happens throughout that traceability process.
I would encourage you to take demos of all the different softwares available and see what makes sense for your
So
operation.
that gentleman,
but-
you had a question?
I just had a new question.
Okay.
I was just wondering if you could offer some insight as to the facilities that you're installing your various platforms in. Like, how much employee bandwidth is it taking to handle this task? Like, are most people appointing a employee to handle this, and that's their sole job, or is this a quarter of the day of a manager, and just some other insight is like the learning curve of manually entering metric versus using one of your programs, I guess.
Sure, yeah. Many of our customers that come from other systems, like maybe the free systems up in Washington or Metric in Nevada or whatever, it's a full-time, it's very often a full-time gig it's a small operation, of course, that's not going to be true, but it could be 1 to several people entering data all day long.
It really probably depends on, sorry to jump in,
Yeah.
panel, but on how much square foot of canopy you have and what type of activity you're doing. So if you have manufacturing and you're making products, it's going to be a lot more data entry as opposed to moving plants. So
I would add, though, what's important is it's not just the training. It's not learning how to do it necessarily, but it's the fact of having to do that every single day and the possibility and probability for errors when you're manually entering information. That's where, and then, then having to reconcile that, that's where it gets really time intensive. And we see customers in other states, again, it really depends on the size of the operation, but they spend hours a day. This is a full-time endeavor for one or perhaps more than one person within that shop.
most facilities will hire a data entry person if they have more than 5,000 square feet of canopy.
I'll just add one other thing is they're absolutely spot on is that it is a full-time job. It's your compliance. One of the unique things about California is it's one of the early adopters of cannabis, but a very low compliance requirements to a highly compliant environment. And so that rapid change is something that California is going to get used to as far as it goes, but it's a risk mitigation to hire this person. You're going to want a compliance person dedicated to it, so that's their sole job to keep you compliant. And it's more of a risk mitigation than anything, because this is your company on the line being compliant with the state. So, I mean, you don't want to just make it a quarter of a manager. You want to say that is your task.
And it's a central language for your operations, so you have accountants or salespeople or people that are growers, they're all communicating on the same platform.
Yeah,
so.
on the retail side of it, though, although it is a continuous cycle, product helps a lot with it. On the retail side, turnover is rampant, right? So if you do it right during an onboarding process, you want to dedicate your entire staff to be bought on to the switch and to the implementation. And once they're bought on, you want the software to help alleviate the ongoing training or ongoing things to be aware of, so that if you do rotate a third of your staff, which happens routinely, the new staff that comes in, it's a very easy training process for them. Either it's self-learning or it's within the application that kind of navigates them to the right path, to not oversell, to do the correct intake process, and so on and so forth.
I want to know, for California licensees that are thinking about going onto a platform, what it looks like to get onto Greenbits, or like how that process is for each of you. So if you can kind of succinctly explain that process, like what the first 2 months look like or something. I'm curious.
Yeah, so for us, we serve California retailers under the notion of like an untracked license type today. Think of us as like payroll software, and then based on the compliance requirements, we configure our software to meet the needs specific to that state. So as the state of California turns on Metric, we'll transition those customers from an untracked to a California tracked license type. We invest a ton in education before that occurs, because there's a lot of unknown. We invest a ton after that happens, because you don't really know what it really means to do this until you're in the throes of it. So you can read documents, you can study up, but until you're feeling it and experiencing it, you don't really get what it means. So from our perspective, We make sure that the inventory is in a good, clean state, because if you start from a bad state of inventory, you're going to have trouble downstream. Start from a good state of inventory, educate up front, educate ongoing in those first 30 to 60 days, and then you're on your way.
So, if I'm a retail store and I want to sign up for Green Bits, which I actually did once, can you walk me through that process? Like, what am I buying? Like, who is somebody showing up on my property to help install it? Or, you know, I like that, those kind of in and outs. I think Californians just want to understand those too.
Yeah, definitely. So, you know, the purchase of point of sale, we're on the retail side only. We sell kind of point of sale software to the retailer. Kind of purchase that hardware. We'll help you set up your inventory, set up the system. We can do that remotely. We can do it on site. We handle it both ways based on your preference. To kind of take you through that training process, not only around the way that compliance works with Greenbits and with Metric, but also just the way that the broader operating system of Greenbits, which facilitates sales and employee management and other capabilities.
And Ike, what's your process like?
Sure. So MJ Freeway operates the full vertical. So we do cultivation, extraction, infusion, or manufacturing, and retail. So we do the full suite. We do a similar process. It's about education. It is still ultimately your compliance. So we want to help educate you, but make the process simpler. So we have a dedicated onboarding team. Depending on the needs, this will be one of the challenges of California, is just the geographical spread and the sheer size of California, but we do have the ability to have on-site personnel for the first week and during the onboarding, and it is hand-holding. He made a great point. It's hand-holding during the beginning phases, getting onboarded, getting all the data points correct, getting the processes correct on how to use the software. The SOPs, just like running your daily business, the SOPs are very important for running the software as well. And then once you're onboarded, staying compliant, doing a reconciliation process between the state system and the software that you're operating. All these are important pieces along the way. So education's a very important part of it.
And for Californians that already have inventory, are you like having them fill out spreadsheets, or do they have to, like, what does that look like?
So you have to ultimately get the data into the system.
Right.
And so we can pull it into our system via a spreadsheet, manual, all the different ways are available. But I think the key, and we were talking about that, is when the switch gets flipped for Metric, you're operating in an unlicensed manner. You've taken all the data points, the plants, whatever inventory you do have, and then you're flipping a switch. And much like John said, we then have to restrict the workflow, because Metric has a restricted workflow. It takes you from a much wider workflow to a much narrower one. And so once you flip the switch, certain features just aren't available during that transition.
Rufus?
Yeah, sure. So basically, we want to know what your menu is, what your prices are, if you've got any custom labeling, your artwork, your brand for your packaging. We'll load all of that up for you so you don't have to do all the manual stuff. We'll figure out what inventory you have on hand, how much flour, how much packaged goods, how much oil, whatever it is, however many plant strains you have. We'll upload that all for you. The first day is about a 1 hour kind of data verification with one of your lead inventory guys or maybe your sales guy. And then we'll do a team training sometime the next week. Have a couple of your key guys in for a couple of hours. And whenever you're ready to start after that, I should say it's free as well. We do a free trial. The trial starts after we've done your training, after you're actually using it, when you're invoicing people. It's a free 30 days, and then if you like it, if you continue, we'd start collecting monthly payment. There's no contract. We don't lock people in. We don't trap them in for a year. Of course, you have to in certain other, in retail it's very different because there's hardware, it's a different market. But for the grow, there's really nothing to buy. No special printers. You can use whatever you want for labels, for printing, and all that stuff. So we try and do everything as easy as possible. These guys are not necessarily wanting to do any of this in the first place.
Right. And actually, I'm curious about this for you, John. When you're onboarding people, are you normally setting up a brand new retail store, or they're already operating and you have to deal with their inventory? Are you seeing in California?
Yeah, I mean, 80% of our customer base has been displacing some existing system, and so it's less so of setting up a new store. I think setting up a new store is easier because they'll listen. But that habits, derived from old systems and old workflows presents challenges. So at Trees, we really obsess over the customer experience. So we don't do any deployments that's not on site because we understand the nuances and the complications of the various scenarios of how you get onboarded onto Trees. Did you come from Spreadsheet? Are you a new shop? Did you come from a competitor? There's so many different nuances there. Is there an accountant on staff that you need to deal with? Is there IT people you need to deal with? You can't simply just, here's the software, here's the login, here's a password, here's some remote training, and we might be there to help you set up. It's not going to fly. It hasn't. That's not how we've onboarded at all in California or outside of California. So we do. I do have a philosophy here that in 5 years, the group here, our technology might be at par, right? We should. It's 5 years is a long time. But what's going to set us apart by then is our customer service. So for us, a third of our organization is customer facing, and it'll continue to be so as we grow.
Are you hardware specific?
We're not.
Okay.
It's agnostic.
Okay. Uh-huh.
How do you handle it when you have such a high turnover rate in the retail? You've trained, you've done all this wonderful hand-holding, and voila, somebody quits and you have to train somebody else. How do you handle that?
The question is regarding high turnover rate in the retail space and
It is. I mean,
training.
bud tenders turn over quite a bit. The beauty of, like, we've designed our software to be really straightforward, particularly on the front-facing side, on the bud tender side. So the whole point is to kind of ring up a sale without the ability to make an error and let the software power the compliance activity so that you're not selling over limit, that the sale is being reported and reported accurately. The whole point is to make it easy to deal with that environment.
Okay, and Ozam from Distro had a question, and he's in a similar field as everybody on the panel.
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious for those of you guys who've operated outside of state. What are some of the unique traceability challenges you'll see with California? Like I hear, like there's different types of transfers here that are not in other states. What are some of like the things where operators can face complexities that could have like big impact on their operation? Like little mistakes they could make that could have like serious consequences.
Specific to California?
Yeah. Sure. So one of the unique things about California is the delivery model. There's actually a fourth license type, which is the ability to move, the guys who are licensed to move product from one location to another one. So that is unique to California, and I think that's partly...
Yeah, there's a lot of differences, I think, in California. But there's like delivery, there's the delivery, the micro license. So I think that there's a lot of structural differences. Sorry to jump in here, panel, but in some ways, I think people coming from an adult use market in another state is kind of like time travel. I've experienced this myself. I've experienced time travel myself, going to Nevada when they first came on and kind of like, should we adapt to this model or should we go be kind of looking at rules in the states where it's already gone adult use? So I suspect with California it'll be a hybrid, like people here are used to working in a certain way and the software will have to adapt to that. California is going to have a learning curve and have to adapt to adult use as well. But
yeah, I just wondered if you had an opinion on the different type of tags. Which one the tags, the RF tags, and which one would you recommend, and what are the pros and cons of each type?
Sorry. Yeah, you have to get it from the state. Metric actually sells them to California.
so for the time being, everyone that's a third-party integrator that's setting you up is going to have an internal barcoding system. Correct me if I'm wrong. But then when Metric comes online, they're using Metric's barcoding system.
And the funny thing is the RFID technology doesn't work in grows because of all the water. So it's completely pointless.
Okay, we have a question over here.
I mean, it's not funny, I guess.
Do any of your systems account for looping? Do any of your systems account for looping on the retail side, like going back multiple times, the same day?
Yeah, absolutely. You have to. I mean, there's precedents said that people are getting shut down because of the looping. So our systems, we track the customers, the patients, their limits, and if it's multi-location operator, has that person been coming back and how often, and are they exceeding, the compliant limits, the regular limits?
They buy an ounce, in the morning and then come back later that day.
Absolutely.
Right. So they do have looping. What's interesting is you can't keep buying the limit 4 times a day. So all the systems have looping involved in it, and this will be interesting to see how California evolves. One of the systems we're integrated with Maryland, and they set up a central patient registry to address looping across systems. So each of our systems monitors within our own systems to avoid looping, but I don't monitor trees to see if they bought there versus another store to see if they bought here. So a state mandated system is the only way to deal with looping at a state level. And so Maryland has one. California's talked about it, but they're still working on just getting metric in place. But I would not be surprised if in the coming years you see a patient registry to avoid looping and quite a few other prescription type of activities at a state level. And then that'd be another integration.
Are any of you focusing or developing anything specifically for the delivery market in California?
We are, yeah, at Trees.
Okay.
So our platform is a point of sale. It's inventory management.
Yeah.
You know, it's analytics, but it's also online ordering, all encompassed into one, specifically targeted to the delivery operators and the brick and mortar operators that has a delivery operation.
Okay, cool.
So I was going to say our system as well. We're a full ERP system, so we go cultivation, the extraction, infusion, and the retail, and the delivery is just part of that system. So we want to track the full traceability as part of the system. So we as well are going at the delivery market as well.
Similarly, and I think that's one of the complexities of California to the question before. Just because you're doing a delivery, you still have to account for and track from a compliance perspective, and that's a nuance that will make California unique. But
And
like
it
the
seems
rest,
like it's sort of, it seems as though the delivery model is similar to as a point of sale system. Like it's like a retail store in the car, kind of, right?
well, as far as the state's concerned, they want to know where the product is going, whether
Yeah.
it's delivered or where it's picked up in store. So that's where it comes into play.
Right.
But you are correct, because at the door is the point of sale. That's the point of transaction. And as all of us talked about, the compliance is important. So at the point of transaction, it's got to go all the way to the sale. It can't just stop and say, I ordered it, and then the money exchanged at the door. You got to track it all the way to that point. So it is a location.
I'm curious how you guys are handling the multiple licenses, because I've found that is something that's very different in California, onboarding someone with 40 licenses or something like that. Is that relevant to any of your processes? It seems like maybe in the middle.
Yeah, we have, I think, what's that? Well, you should probably know this, actually, asking
I do.
yourself a question.
But go ahead.
Seeding. I think our largest, I think they have 20, was it 20 licenses?
Yeah, our largest one is we have 22.
22.
And it's like 20 cultivation, 1 manufacturing, 1
She's talking to
distribution.
herself.
Well, so I'll say, I got this, you guys. So at GrowFlow, we handle it by toggling between the accounts, but you could also manifest something to your other account. So there's some internal fixes. But I'm curious, I want to hear someone else besides.
Sure. So what's interesting is Colorado has a very complex licensing scheme as
Right.
well, right?
Like,
Where
what's
you
the
can
max
only
number? I'm
license 100
curious.
plants,
Okay.
and it's designated medical. You can license 1,000 plants or dedicated recreational, and they can all be in the same grow, but
Right.
Colorado has to license them all. So it's one of the places we're integrated against. And so the rules that California is going through has a very similar model. They're not exactly the same, to your point earlier, so we have to modify the software and make sure it's ready for the workflows. And so that's what we're actively working on.
And I'm curious, does anyone here think that they'll be merging the licenses in 2025, or that
Yeah.
kind of a narrative are you hearing?
I hope so. Yeah.
I'd be surprised. State regulations move slowly. Colorado still has the same license model that was designed for 20,000-foot grows for that plant system.
Right.
And now there's 150,000-foot indoor grows, and they still have the 100-plant license model, the 51. And so I would be surprised. Maybe 2025? That's a long ways
No,
along.
I've actually been hearing that as a date, so I don't know where people got that number, but
Speaking of specific license types, do any of you have a system designed around nurseries specifically?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a nightmare because you have the option to tag the plant. You don't have to tag the plant in veg. So our system is the standalone. We have this whole special workflow that we had to build just for nurseries. Yeah. We have a free demo if you want.
Ditto.
I'm sure
I'll just say
everybody here
ditto.
will be happy to give you demos out there. What were you going to say, Ike?
I was just going to say ditto. You have to deal with the complexities of it, and it is a non-taggable event here in California with the metric system.
So, John, you indicated that you might have some unique information about SIPCA.
SICPA?
Excuse me.
Yeah.
But would you mind sharing what it is, what SICPA is for those who don't know, and whatever?
Yeah, so I mentioned them early on. As a refresher, SICPA is an entity. What they do is anti-counterfeit stamps for tobacco industry. So they created a system, and they vied for the California State Track and Trace program in competition with Metric. And they're actually deployed in some reputable counties in Mendocino, in Humboldt, in Yolo. The growers, the cultivators out there actually today are track and trace compliant through SICPA, through Cal Origins. And SICPA made a smart decision to also integrate with Metric. So that means if you are a cultivator in one of those counties that has SICPA's program installed and operating, you are essentially also compliant with metrics, so you're ahead of the curve, right? And they offer some differentiation factors that I find very compelling. Number one, the whole premise is to provide a lot of training, a lot of education. What does it mean? And they did this way early on, whereas a lot of the industries are procrastinating. They have operators that's today compliant. And they provide these stamps that are much smaller than the RFID tags, much, much smaller. They're QR code based, they're anti-counterfeit, and they are appealing at the retail level because you can then scan, right, that label, that QR code, and get the lab results and get the appellations or the originating details by simply scanning and making sure it is a valid product from a select desirable region.
It's
It's very interesting.
It's an interesting concept. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that or any of the systems? No. I guess, let's see, are you all cloud-based or what? If you want to talk to the technology, I guess, of how your system is built or how people access it, I think that would be interesting to explore a little bit.
So we have a kind of dedicated register at the point of sale. So touchscreen, very fast, very rapid, kind of foolproof. And then we have kind of a cloud-based back office. So owner, manager, compliance manager can access, kind of see the activity within the business or across businesses, kind of at any point, any time. So yeah, we're kind of a combination, cloud-based with a dedicated register.
Okay.
Perfect. So we're cloud-based. All you need is a laptop and a browser, and you're up and running with the system. From the cultivation to the extraction fusion and the retail side, it can be surfaces, it can be iPads, whatever it is. The key part is got to have it connected to some printers on the retail side for label printing or for receipt printing. And so getting that connected, then it can be either USB or print servers, wireless inside the network, and so it works similar.
Is the way your state, because you have the state system and then third-party integration system with two different names, but are they built similarly, I guess? Are they both cloud-based? Yeah.
So what she's talking about that may be confusing is that MJ Freeway operates two different sides of the spectrum. We actually have a software stack called Leaf Data Systems, and that is, we have contracts with the state systems in Washington and Pennsylvania. We also run a commercial side, and so the commercial side is what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
They are very similar. The big difference between the state-run systems is we host in what's called the GovCloud. It has what's called ITAR compliance, which is not required for cannabis. It's supposed to be around weapons sales, but it is a requirement of any of our state contracts to host that into the GovCloud. But they are very similar in the fact that they are, all you need is a browser and just some internet connection, not even a big bandwidth.
Okay. And
Yeah, same.
So we are cloud-based, but we do differentiate a little bit in that we do have a local solution for stability reasons, for internet outage reasons. I mean, the very first customers in California that we had, they were in parts of California that even today do not have access to AT&T, to Comcast, to cable.
That's a big
satellite
one.
internet.
Yeah.
And it goes down, internet goes down once a week. And when you're talking about being metric compliant, well, cool, if you have internet and cloud access, maybe some of the providers have a queuing system to send it to Metric if Metric happens to be down. But what if you're in a situation where you don't have internet at all, right? So
Do you find that in the retail stores too?
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. So we allow our operators to be compliant even when the internet's out or Metric's out.
Okay, cool. Are there any questions in the audience? Yeah?
You're going to get audited, so it's about so it's about having an audit for an audit, and so all of our systems, of course, preps you to make sure that whatever we're reporting live automatically to Metric is represented there when an audit happens, and then there are stamps and every which way you use the system to make sure that we can track it to a person, to an individual, or to an action that has occurred.
I would add you're going to get audited, absolutely. It's helpful to know when you're likely to get audited as well, and that's driven by the fact that you have discrepancies. So at Greenbits, we've kind of developed, initially we were just kind of making sure that the data was going in. We've gotten to a point now where we're more proactively helping our retailers understand whether things are starting to get out of bounds and notifying them if that's the case, and then spend some time with them to kind of get things back into order. Typically, it's kind of training and education. Like they've got staff that just don't understand how the system works or what needs to be done. And to the degree that we can kind of give them that notification, we're going to reduce the propensity or the likelihood. And then when audits occur, kind of helping those clients with the state governments as well. We've done that up in Oregon quite a bit.
If you stray from your traceability program, it's hard to backpedal or get it in bounds. Does anyone else have any other questions? Yes.
I'll take that. Everything we've tried to do is to make it as simple to use as possible. Now, of course, there's some reporting for the people that want to kind of nerd out, but on a day-to-day, the way that GrowFlow has handled that is we've got a left-to-right flow. So we've got clones on the left, vegging, flowering, drying plants. Very, very easy to see what's going on. So the growers come in, they know where the flowering plants are, they know how to apply their newts, they know how to destroy. It's just really easy to use. So you don't necessarily need to at least in our system, you don't really need to have one person doing everything. But for large operations, you're going to have a couple of full-time employees, probably.
What I think you might find is all of us want to make it as simple as possible. I mean, technology is something that should be there to help you, not hinder you, right? So all of us are working hard at trying to make it easy as possible to use, to different visual cues, different pieces. I think when we talk about that, having that dedicated person, it's more from a risk standpoint than anything. We want them to start out as a dedicated person to make sure you stay compliant. It's very important to reconcile metric to these systems every now and then to make sure that the data is moving correctly. We've even started to build in reconciliation processes into our software just to help that process. Maybe that person only works on compliance a quarter of the time for a smaller operation, but that's their number one job because it's such a big risk for you. And the other 3/4 they could be working on something else. But that's the idea there is you really want to mitigate the risk of this system. You want to make sure you're compliant. No matter how well any of the software packages work, you want to mitigate that risk.
A lot of people ask this type of question, it seems like when they're getting set up, and I'm sure you guys experience that as far as like, well, we want everybody to have access to it. It's like, that's cool, there's user logins, but if they can make movements that put you out of compliant, you might want to mitigate that risk. Did you?
Yeah, I would really reinforce what was said. It's not so much about the training to be able to do the actions, it's more about the accountability.
Right.
And if you don't have a single person accountable, you'll have nobody accountable and you're gonna fall out of compliance. And all of our software is gonna help you stay compliant, but compliance is much more than what any of our software packages do, and it's a much more comprehensive, and it ultimately falls on the license holder. So that accountability and that dedicated individual who has that ownership is the key piece of the equation.
Yeah, if you add an extra 0, you're out of compliance or something like that. So having a external trim crew come in and do conversions on your system is a pretty high risk. Is there any other questions specifically? Uh-huh.
How difficult would it be to correct an error? Let's say I input something and I accidentally press the wrong button. How would you go about correcting that mistake?
Just don't do it too often, right? But I mean, there's going to be
Just don't make mistakes. No.
There's going to be checks and balances in the system inherently, warning messages, undo, redo. Systems are built that way to really, anticipate errors. That's part of our job, is to anticipate those and help you correct them. But just don't do it too often, because if you do it too often, as part of the metric system, it will get flagged, and if it does get flagged, then that's subject to an audit.
And I should say that metric is written as a universal system. So the folks that are on the panel, I believe they're all written with different parameters for each state. Correct me if I'm wrong. To block you from doing something out of compliance in your state, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't make a mistake.
One of the other things I was going to add real quick is that communication with the state will be key as you guys get to a more compliant state. A piece of miscommunicated data, whether manually entered into metric or through one of the systems, whether you keyed it in wrong, when you want to get back into compliance, always keep a nice open communication with the states. That's the best way to manage the states, is that communication. Don't get scared of the state because it is off by a little bit. Call them, let them know that you want to make some corrections and address it.
But maybe ask your supervisor before you contact the state.
Yeah,
Just
like
kidding.
from our perspective, think about like manually entering information at the point of sale, at least on the retail side, is yet one more place where you can make those mistakes. So this goes into the setup process and the rigor that goes into, if you get the data set up in the right way up front, you're going to be in a good position ongoing. We encourage barcoding everything. The more that you barcode, it's going to be an electronic read. You're not going to make those mistakes. So again, it's kind of one more mechanism to make the system foolproof for the users.
All right. So I guess just what general advice do you give people from all of your experience as they go towards the licensing process, or maybe they have their temporary and they are anticipating getting their annual, somewhere in that zone?
Yeah, my advice would be that once you get your credentials, when you do get your credentials onto metric, have at it, practice, start, right? Don't wait until the last second, last moment. We've seen through our system, when purportedly it was going to be online January 1st of 2018, we got calls, because our support line's open 24/7, we got calls on New Year's Eve. We got calls on the 1st, right? And people are just in a panic, in a rush. But you still have some time, and when you do get those credentials, that's your time to really get the training. They actually provide trainings, at least on the retailers, for our dispensary operators. So subject yourself to those trainings, practice, get through the systems, help with the system's help, and really have at it.
Yeah, I would say the number one thing would be to talk to people that have already done this. I don't mean people that are selling you stuff. I mean other growers or other dispensaries. Talk to people that have already done it. See what they liked about their chosen software. See what they didn't like. Really, that's the only way you're going to get unbiased stuff.
I'm just going to emphasize what these two guys say. Don't wait till the last minute. Whether you're going to use the metric system by itself, whether you're going to use one of the integrator pieces of software, go ahead and invest in that piece of stuff and get going on it as soon as possible. Learn the regulations, and talk to your community. That's one of the best part about cannabis, is it is a very community-oriented thing. So talk to other growers, just like Rufus said. Talk to other manufacturers and talk to other retails. It's a very community-oriented community. I like that part of it.
I echo, preparation is valuable. Don't be afraid, but definitely budget the time. Take it seriously. Like it is going to take a lot of time. Don't be scared by that, but account for and plan for that. And if you do that, you're going to be fine.
Yeah. And I guess my thought is just people will look at some of the folks that have implemented the third-party traceability systems and consider it maybe a luxury, but I would kind of unwind that for the smaller people and say, that it should be saving you time and money to follow these systems now, and then you won't kind of have whiplash when metric starts. Yes.
So just another quick question. So say there's operators who have different license types. What are, like, if they were to ask you, hey, should we use like one tool that can cater to all our different license types versus specialized software that deals with specific license type? What are the real like trade-offs for the operator if they pick one, if they go one way or another?
Sure. So you're talking about picking a piece of, 3 pieces of software, one for cultivation, one for, fusion versus a one-fit-all type of system. Pros and cons is, best in breed, or you get a system that's consistent all the way through. You get kind of those 2 different benefits. It's all going to track up to metric at the end of the day. So, you have to deal with that. So it's going to be a 50-50 most of the time, whether you pick one that does just retail and then go use your cultivation, different one, use a growth flow, and then use a trees for the retail side. You get that ability to have 2 different systems that are designed specialized to it, or a generic system, and I'm trying to be neutral up here.
Like this is very biased.
That's consistent all the way across. The same piece of software. It's the exact same piece. So in my case, I do all the pieces. MJ Freeway does the cultivation, E&I, and so you use the same piece of software to track it from the very start to the very end at the retail side, but it always looks the same. So if there's, again, being neutral up here, if there's a piece of my software you don't like, you're going to have to deal with that one piece of annoyance throughout all 3 of them, whereas you can pick and choose for the best in breed on each of the pieces. And again, I'm trying to be neutral, but that is kind of the choice. And this is the choice with software, no matter if it's cannabis or in any other place, is you're going to have to pick and choose on different pieces, and some offer big pieces, some offer very specialized niches. It's just software in general on that front. I think you're going to find it's
Yeah, taking it away from these exact companies, like being in another state where we dealt with vertical versus what just grow, just retail, I would encourage people to look at the processes that they like the best and weigh out the pros and cons. You might have 2 systems that you like, both of them, and then one system that you don't like. But you kind of, it's constantly communicating to metric through API, so you can find 2 or 3, or, in California, it seems like you could find many softwares for your needs. But
well, I was going to say, look, all of us have kind of taken different approaches to that question. I would say, as a license holder, look at what your needs are. To the point, there's pros and cons with each. We focus purely on the retail side, and our philosophy is that we're going to do that, and we're going to do it really well. Like, retail software is very different than a farm, like growing product. That's just our philosophy. That might work for some license holders. It might not work for others.
And in an unbiased way, maybe if you have the grow on the same property as the retail, that's a different type of shopping experience than if the grow's over there and the retail's over there and you aren't touching the same system in the day.
I think you guys hit it right on the head. Test out the workflows. Test out all of us. We'd be more than happy to demo it for you.
Yeah. Right?
Test them all out, see which one fits your needs. Or test out the metric system straight. See if it does enough when you're doing it. It probably won't. I'll tell you that right now, but try them all out.
Well, I think that we're just at about time. I hope that it was informative, and we wish you all the best on your journey towards getting a license and navigating the California adult use cannabis. Okay.